And we have a great keynote speaker with us tonight. We are very proud and very happy to announce the keynote speech of Professor Dr. Ozcan Saritas from HSE University in Moscow, Russia. So it's the National Research University Higher School of Economics. He is the editor-in-chief of Foresight journal. He's also head of the Institute for Statistical Studies and Economics of Knowledge. He has many responsibilities, and I touch just on a few. He performs management of the Research Laboratory for Science and Technology Studies at HSC Statistical Studies and Economics of Knowledge. He performs project management of the laboratory and implementation of relevant objectives and functions. He organizes and conducts research within the framework of the Basic Research Program and the Global Competitive Program. He coordinates activities of the research team members all across the board. He supervises junior scholars of the laboratory, great work with young researchers, and he participates in organization of research conferences and workshops of the laboratory and institutes. The list is long, Ozcan, but now the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being with us from Russia. We're so happy.
Thank you, Markus. I'm very pleased to be here, and I would like to thank you, first of all, and the members of the mail team, who introduced me to you, and then provided my participation to this great event. And you made an already excellent presentation of myself. I'm horrified by the number of things I'm doing. So I should maybe reorganize myself to do less things. That's too much. Anyway, I have been listening to the presentations during the day on and off, and I must say that this has been an excellent event so far. There were great presentations about digital trust, about academic publications, and so on. So hopefully my presentation will be relevant to what is discussed today at this conference. I'm a new person actually to this community, entirely new, and I'm hoping that what I will say will not be totally out of context or something like that. And if it is so, please accept my apologies in advance. Otherwise, hopefully this will help us to build some common grounds and move forward with our cooperation. So I'll talk about Foresight. I guess some of you might have heard about this concept, and it might be new for the others, so I'll kind of bring us to the same page on what I'm talking about. It is the art and science of anticipating the future. So I will tell very briefly why should we think about the future, why it is important to us, and then how we do it, what are the methods, processes, and approaches, and why it is important, for example, in terms of digital trust and the other topics we are discussing. Then I will briefly change my hats, and I'll wear the hat of my editor position, and then we'll talk about the Foresight journal very briefly. So I'll introduce the journal, and then we will explore the possibilities of having publications in this journal with a special issue based on the presentations in this conference. So I'm hoping that this will be a great interest to the audience. So a biography, I'm not going to take too long. So this is a journey. Actually, I started from Istanbul, first of all, Istanbul Technical University. After that, continuing at the University of Manchester with a PhD in prospective foresight and prospective studies. Then I was appointed as the editor of the Foresight journal in 2009, so I'm conducting this position since then. And then since 2012, I'm a member of the Higher School of Economics, Professor of Innovation of Foresight, and doing projects both at the national and international levels. And of course, during this time, I was involved in some capacity building activities through executive education, research supervision, and keynote speeches, working closely with the international organizations and engaged in some networks for cooperation and knowledge sharing in the field of foresight and future studies. So why are we concerned about the future? I think we are all concerned about the future. It is all important to us, and some of us are really worried about the future. And some of us see this as a great space for possibilities. So the future is there with all its advantages, disadvantages, and surprises. And it is important to all of us to think about the future, because if we don't do so, it is too costly for us. If we don't plan our own future, we will leave the future of the which the others planned. So others planned futures. So therefore, it's a better idea to control our own future. So futures thinking and foresight are the first steps of innovation. Basically, we would like to think about the future. We would like to think about a time period which hasn't been planned yet. So it is a blank sheet, and we need to write the story of this future with full of innovations and make these innovations happen after that. And future is uncertain, and so there's a lot of space for creativity, building innovations, thinking out of the box. So this is what we are trying to do. But at the same time, thinking about the future helps us to set our priorities, because we don't have endless resources. We don't have endless amount of time. We don't have endless amount of money. We don't have endless amount of skills. So we need to use what we have as strategically as possible. And we do it by bringing together the stakeholders and experts in the field. So we think about the future in a collective way by putting our heads together, and we try to learn from each other. So there's a great deal of mutual learning, collective visioning, because we know that the future can only be created and visions can only be achieved if we bring our expectations together, align them, build visions and strategies and policies in order to get there. So this is actually what the essence of foresight is. So if I'm going to present a formal definition of that, I would pick this one, which explains the process of foresight. It is a systematic activity, so thinking about the future is actually a project. It has a process, it has methods, it has its milestones and deliverables. So it is done in a systematic way to make sure that we achieve some results as at the end of this activity. So this is not about like a futurism or something like that. We see this sort of concepts around very often. So we are not actually speculating about the future or kind of presenting our dreams or anything like that. This is a purely evidence-based activity, uses some qualitative and quantitative methods. It is a participatory process, so it's not a single person's view of the future, but it is actually bringing all actors of the innovation system, whether this is the policymakers, academics, researchers, industry, and other social actors. So there's actually a broad landscape of stakeholders we bring together, and we look into the future together. It's a process of future intelligence gathering and medium to long-term vision building process in order to inform present-day decisions. So we don't only think about the future and design the future and leave it there. We also try to show the pathway to that future. So it's a process that needs to be managed. So there are some actions which need to be taken at the long term, medium term, and short term. And then we need to integrate these actions into our day-to-day activities in order to achieve that future. Because the future is not too far. It is actually nearby. And if we want to achieve that, we need to start acting already today. And there are several pillars of the foresight activity. One is about building futures literacy. This is a set of skills for designing scientifically possible, economically feasible, and socially desirable futures for anticipatory governance, So we try to kind of communicate this idea, increase awareness that there's a future, we can design it, we can do something about it, and this future should be possible, feasible, and desirable at the same time. And we also, during the process of Foresight, explore some futures, trends, and drivers in order to stay ahead of emerging and evolving social, technological, economic, environmental, political, and value systems. So there are a lot of trends in those systems. These are very dynamic and changing, and then there are a lot of factors shaping our futures. So we saw, for example, during this COVID-19 pandemic, how a simple health issue can be a global problem, because we are living in a large system which has interacting elements of society, technology, economy. So it became an issue, not only merely a health focused, but it is actually affecting our daily lives, how we practice our activities, for example. We started using these remote tools. If we didn't use these remote tools, now I would give a big hug to Markus, for example. I would shake his hands, and then we could have a picture together, and then we could have probably beer after the meeting. So I'm really missing those days. Hopefully we'll get back to that. But we see that all these activities, all these problems, a simple virus. So for example, in the past, we were talking about the butterfly effect. Now we are talking about the bat effect, for example, with the COVID-19. So we see that this was a small issue, but it became suddenly a big issue due to globalization, international connections, logistics, transportation, tourism, diets, and things like that. So the whole life is actually a complex system, and everything interacts. So it's very important to understand trends and drivers in the system. And we use some methods for this purpose. We design a methodology, and we need skills for combining qualitative and quantitative data and information for creative, interactive, and evidence-based anticipation. So, in this, I just would like to show one slide very briefly, saying that thinking about the future is not something new, and planning the future, it has a long history. Actually, the act of anticipation is a basic human characteristic. We always think about the future. And this activity, as you see in this timeline, has evolved across time. And today, we have reached a point where we are talking about the increasing pace of scientific and technological development. And we see rapid emergence of, for example, artificial intelligence, and bringing this together with the human intelligence and trying to achieve some sort of collective intelligence to achieve. Until we came to this point, we went through the Second World War, we went through the oil crisis, we went through the emergence of innovation systems, for example. We went through the grand challenges and grand responses, all the societal problems, and then now we are here today. And we have, again, new opportunities and at the same time new threats that we need to be prepared for. If we look at the Foresight activity, for example, we first of all try to understand what we are thinking about, what we are talking about. And we scope this activity in order to define the borders. So what we are looking at, what is the future that we are concerned with? This could be digitalization, this could be information and communication technologies, or some scientific areas like biotechnologies, nanotechnologies, and others, or some societal problems like sustainable development, the future of health, education, and so on. So we apply these methodologies in a wide variety of fields. And then we design a methodology and process for that. So we have some activities. As you see, there's a methodological approach, which we represent with the 4 star. So I will talk about that in a minute, more detail. So we go through a participative process. As I said, this is not a single person's job. It is a job of collective intelligence and collective thinking. So in each phase, we bring all the actors and stakeholders around the table, around the platform, whether physical or digital, and then we provide them necessary tools and instruments so that they can formulate the problem, understand the trends and drivers, build some common visions, and then future alternatives and scenarios, and then set some priorities and formulate some strategies in order to get there. And after that, these strategies are formulated as policy recommendations, and all the stakeholders receive their tasks, their roadmaps, and then we go through a process of implementation of these recommendations. We monitor them in time, make some evaluations, and see how we can improve this activity better next time around. We use a number of methods for this. As I said, some of these are tools which are qualitative or quantitative. We bring as much as possible evidence, expertise, and creativity together in this one. And then there are a set of methods which can be used. For example, in order to gather some future intelligence, we use some big data, science, technology, innovation, mining. We do some horizon scanning and environmental scanning activities. We also look at the previous studies, which is always a very useful exercise in order to not to repeat, but then we build on the top of what we have. For example, a big data has been a very important instrument for us. We, in the past, relied mainly on the expert knowledge, but now we can collect millions of data from very different sources of information, and we can bring them together and understand the trends and drivers of change which are emerging from this collective intelligence. So data is our major asset, major source of information at the moment. And we also have a great deal of imagination. So future is also about imagination. It is an unwritten and landscape for us. So we have a lot of possibilities to design some new futures, to think about alternative scenarios, and then again to articulate them into some visions, priorities, and actions. So we can talk about this picture as just for information. I will cut it short at this point, but if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. So in this landscape, we talked about technologies and digital trust today. I heard many words and presentations on this topic during the day, and I'm sure tomorrow there will be also a lot more talks. I'd like to communicate here is that the future is composed of a number of technologies. So as you see in this picture, I put a lot of different technologies, from information technologies to technologies connecting us, technologies giving us opportunities to imagine and build some virtual futures, technologies that help us to innovate, build some new infrastructure, and reorganize our industry, and bring us together to interact. So we often talk about individual technologies, for example, big data, or blockchain, or industrial revolution. We should be sure that all these technologies are actually developing in parallel. So we are living in a landscape of different technologies which exist and coexist at the same time. So we should know that these are evolving our life altogether. So we should understand this system. So it's not only one single technology pulling us from present to the future, but it's an ecosystem of these technologies. And it is very important to understand this ecosystem. And the digital trust issue probably becomes a little bit more complex when we are talking about all these different platforms, all these different technologies emerging at the same time and developed in different sites. So we need to achieve some, for example, standardization and the communication of all these technologies, for example, with each other, and developing some law, regulations, and all the kind of related, again, standards and procedures in order to make sure that this ecosystem may work. And where is the place of human in this ecosystem? So we try to be kind of again, involved and engaged in this process of technological advancement. So I developed here 4 scenarios where the human and technology interaction may lead to in the future. So at the moment, when we look at this picture, we see 2 axes. One is technological advancement and the other is human enhancement. And in technological advancement, we have 2 kind of extremes. One could be radical technological advancement and the other could be incremental. And in human enhancement, it is the same, radical and incremental. So at the moment, we are very much at the bottom left corner of this picture. Although we are thinking that we have advanced a lot in technologies, there is still a way to go in order to achieve some more radical solutions and some more radical innovations in the field. We are currently mainly in the bounded intelligence phase. We have limitations that include the difficulty of decision problem. For example, again, if we go back to pandemics, we see how struggling we are, I mean, as humans, in order to deal with this issue. We are almost finishing the 2nd year of this, and we haven't found a solution to this problem yet. So we are really at the beginning still in many ways. And we still need to develop our cognitive capabilities, for example. And we still need to develop our decision-making skills in order to make decisions in time. And there are different directions. So we may have a direction where technologies may overtake human development. So this is the direction going towards singularity, when the machine intelligence outpaces our abilities to maintain control over it. And this is the point where machines can learn themselves without being taught and trained. So there's some strong, actually, defenders of this sort of scenario. But at the same time, we see that there are developments to increase humans' capabilities. For example, cognitive capabilities to learn, form concepts, apply logic, and reason, including the capacities to recognize patterns, plan, innovate, solve problems, make decisions, and use language, a better language, a more effective language to communicate. A more desirable future lies at the top right corner of this picture, where we are talking about human technology collective intelligence. Because as humans, we would like to stay in the loop. So we would like to design human in the loop system. And we don't want to only develop technologies and be outside of these developments after a while, because technologies may already produce and reproduce themselves. We are trying to see how we can bring human brain and technology so that they can connect collectively and act more intelligently than any other person, group, or computer. And this is the direction to go. And again, there are a lot of activities, there are a lot of possibilities in here, but there are also a lot of considerations and how to achieve, for example, digital trust if we are going to human technology collective intelligence, if our brains can communicate, if our brains can communicate with each other, brains can communicate with the technologies, and where the digital trust lies, for example, at this complex system. So I'm raising more questions than answers probably through this presentation right now. And all the developments are good. Actually, technologies are providing us a lot of opportunities. And we should also know that change is not always pain-free. So we always talk about, for example, the new industrial revolution, fourth industrial revolution, but we also should know that there are negative consequences too. And for example, the first industrial revolutions, we saw revolutions in machinery, manufacturing, and transportation. But at the same time, the first industrial revolution brought a lot of slum days, ill people, starvation. So this is a picture from London from the year 1860, how it looked like during the first industrial revolution times. And the second industrial revolution brought a lot of possibilities for the expansion of rail and telegraph lines, movement of people and ideas, and the new way of globalization, and as a result, a destruction at the end of the Second World War. And then we move to the third industrial revolution process, and we are going through this process, which provides us increased access to goods and services, but created at the same time a lot of stress on natural resources, demographic change, the emergence of megacities, and so on. So what may the fourth industrial revolution bring us? Maybe some sort of conflicts between humans and the machines, right? So this is a day in Futurama. So it also shows in a funny, probably way in a cartoon, but it has some question marks actually, which should be in our minds all the time. So how to deal with all these emerging considerations related to technology. This is again where digital trust has an important role to play. And that's why I really find this effort of Markus and the community very valuable. So there might be some unexpected consequences also. So we think that robots and machines will do everything. So this is a robot, for example, Nightscope. It is claimed that this security robot is better than a human guard because it never gets bored of its job. So guess what happened after that? The robot suicided. So found it in the water. So it was bored of its job. So technologies are not always reliable, and they may not always work in the best way, and they may not always replace the people. So I think a good approach is not to replace people with technologies, but to find some solutions where technologies and human can live together. And that is why I would like to communicate finally that we need to design some futures where we answer the questions: what is possible scientifically and ecologically, what is feasible technologically and economically, and what is desirable socially by considering our politics and values. So this should be the future that we should be concerned with, and that we should strive to develop. So a few words about the Foresight Journal. So there is a journal which is dedicated to this field. It is the Journal of Future Studies, Strategic Thinking and Policy. So any kind of future-oriented topic is covered by this journal. So it tries to provide some sort of a platform, a forum for thinking about the future, socio-technological innovations, and factors shaping the future, policies and strategies with new methods and approaches as well. So you are welcome to visit the journal homepage and get more information on that. So here is the editorial team, which is a global team. We have some regional editors across the world in North America, Latin America, Caribbean, Russia, China, South Africa, the whole African continent, Middle East, and so on, and the very well respected members of the editorial advisory board. The journal is indexed in Web of Science, Emerging Source Citation Index, Scopus, and other journals. The impact factor is increasing on a year-to-year basis, so that's a good sign. And we have some special issues on certain topics like this one, and hopefully following this conference we'll be also discussing a special issue on digital trust and related topics covered by this conference. And as I said, this is a global journal, and it has a wide audience and the authorship from different countries. As you can see, it is downloaded by different countries and different universities and their libraries. So when you write in this journal, your voice will be heard all over the place. And we nominate outstanding papers and highly commended papers every year. So your paper might be the next one. So please come and join us. And your voice will be heard by the government, science and research communities, business and industry, education, and society. Because in the future, there is something for everyone. So thank you very much again for giving this opportunity. I'm very pleased to meet you and will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Ozcan, what a great presentation. Thank you so much. You know, we want to publish with you, but now you raised the bar the level so high, we need to think more about the future. Fatih, Meltem, KC, give your best. Günzeli, we need to make a special issue with Ozcan. I open up the discussion. KC from the United States, you may ask some questions or give your, what did you say one time? You give your 50 cents to this.
Well, it's only 2 cents.
We accept cards too.
That's a good one.
Any major cards are accepted. So.
Yeah, this is a wonderful journal, and especially about the 4 different quadrants that Ozcan presented. That's really enlightening. And then one of my other projects is actually human AI symbiosis. So which actually requires the humans to identify their niche, but to work with AI. So Ozcan correctly mentioned that the issue is not to compete head to head, right? The AI is that they can do a computation very fast. Why humans would want to spend time to compete in that area. Well, so it's more about finding a niche where jointly finding the future that the 2 parties can actually work together. That adds so much value to my research. Yeah, thank you, Ozcan. That's really good. That 4 grids, I love it so much.
Fantastic. I'm very glad.
Fatih and Meltem.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Ozcan, for your great presentation and informing us that what will be future look like shortly, actually. And it is, as is maybe a industrial psychologist, I'm very afraid of that there will be a new psychology in terms of people. So we need to understand the new psychology with the machine interaction. Human is a kind of, in the first industrial age, there will be a, the machine psychology. So there is a traffic psychology, because the traffic, the cars and other machines in traffic. So the people have a traffic psychology. So this is the very different area. But in the future, there will be a new psychology. But before that, we need to understand how the people's psychology change according to these machines or with this digital environment. So it is a very interesting area to research. Thank you. Thank you for your introducing the field.
I would like to thank Ozcan Saritas for taking place on this scene with us. And we really appreciate his support to this congress. Thanks for being with us. I just want to say something about your presentation. It was really invaluable for us. Can you hear me, by the way?
Sure.
Is it clear?
Yes.
I'm checking because I'm going to have a presentation now. Well, I am so much sometimes overwhelmed with the technology, even though I am an educational technologist, but sometimes I am really fed up with using so much technology around me. And these days we are talking about artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blah, 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 it goes on like that, okay? Many technologies are on the way. So what will happen to us, our health? And, sometimes I feel very tired of multitasking by using all those technologies around me. So what will happen next, Ozcan Hocam?
Sure, that's a wonderful question. And it's I don't know what currency to use nowadays, $1 million, I should say, million lira or million ruble question, I don't know, or million euro. So yes, that's our big question. So what is the role of human in this technological ecosystem? Because we should definitely make sure that we don't lose the control of these technologies, and we remain a part of this, an essential part of these developments, and hopefully at the center of all these developments. But are we there yet? Not yet. And first of all, there's still a lot to go, but that doesn't mean that we should sit back and relax. We should be already concerned with what is coming and what is emerging. As you said, we are already overwhelmed with so many different technologies. And that makes lives very complex. And I guess we need to find some better ways to organize our lives. For example, how the education is delivered, right? Which parts of education, for example, could be automatized, and which parts we should still maintain the human kind of a connection and the human feel. And because at the moment, of course, the artificial intelligence is coming, but it is far from replacing humans. But there's some progress. So that means we can share some of our jobs with that, and you know, to some extent, in a positive way, let's say. For example, how the healthcare services are provided. And first of all, for example, in the healthcare industry, the main thing is the preventive health, and how we can use all this artificial intelligence and information sources and data, big data, for example, in order to not to make our people ill. So it is important. It is actually much less costly to prevent people being ill than curing them afterwards. So definitely there's a room to use artificial intelligence and this sort of technologies. And also the transport, for example, we are overwhelmed, as Fatih just said, about, for example, if I go to street now, I will see a lot of people sitting in traffic jams and losing time, consuming energy, and so on. So there are great possibilities. We should exploit them, but we should also discuss, so what is our role and to what extent we can achieve, how we can balance our life and work, for example, because they started mixing with each other. That means we need a new definition of what is work and a new definition of what is life, and what percentage of this life will be virtual and what percentage of this life will be physical. There's no clear formulation of that, but we really need to design our life as a whole. So it's not only about the future of technology. As I said, we look at as a system which consists of social considerations, technological, economic considerations, environmental, political, value, and cultural considerations. How we can actually share the same platform while we aim to remain unique, for example. So we won't be like a uniform people, right? Thinking in the same way, doing in the same way. So how we can keep our uniqueness so that we will still be very excited to meet each other and we will have something different to tell to each other. So these are the questions. I'm telling that, again, I'm giving more questions than answers because these are some ongoing questions. I'm hoping that at some point we can put our heads together and then design a kind of livable, desirable lives so that we can try to achieve this sort of vision of the future where we can live in a peaceful, healthy, world with a kind of a better lifestyle.
Thank you very much, Professor Saritas, for giving us such a thought-provoking presentation, showing us lots of perspectives we can pursue in relation to the future, in education, in health, and yeah, this is a very robust framework, I would say. Thank you.
I'm very pleased, Professor Kacar. I hope this is just the beginning and a very quick introduction to the topic. And I hope our conversation will continue because I'm really glad that I was exposed to this community. And once again, many thanks to Professor Launer and the MEL team. And we really had some previous talks, but it is great that we finally made to this day and then achieve this conversation. Hopefully we will continue and create some futures, desirable futures for us.
Thank you.
Ozcan, thank you so much. Who has thought that e-learning and online learning would be so successful? It needed a pandemic to make it happening. Ozcan, we are researching on digital trust. We will make it more to the future, more to new technologies. And Fatih and I, we were also researching on intuition and digital trust. So with the University of Karlsruhe, I was discussing if you're in virtual worlds and need to make decisions,
Sure.
How did you do this intuitively? Yeah. So there are lots of questions, and all the researchers still listening or already sleeping in the Philippines, China, and in Japan, we would like to support your journal. The level is high now, but we will deliver hopefully by the end of the year interesting paper.
Yeah. I'm also looking forward to learning from you. So this is a mutual learning process. And I see that there's a lot also I can learn from you, because I really believe your research and your focus. Digital trust is very important. It's not only about technological development, but trust should also be there, because this is trust is the most basic thing, actually, element of our lives. Without trust, we cannot go anywhere. We should trust each other, we should trust our technologies, and our technologies should trust back to us as humans.